ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं शरवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गणन्ति हुरिराज. Your words are like nectar, bring life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're starting a new chapter. This is chapter 37, the Master and Narendra. It starts on page 707, and the date is Sunday, March 1st, 1885. So we're just about 1 month before Thakur starts getting a sore throat and they discover the cancer, then later moves to Shambhapur and then Kashipur. So we're getting close to that final year. Sri Ramakrishna was seated on the small couch in his room, absorbed in deep samadhi. Mahimacharan, Ram, Manamohan, Nabai Chaitanya, M, and other devotees were sitting on a mat spread on the floor. They were watching the master intently. It was the day of the Dol Jatra, a Hindu religious festival. Sri Krishna and Radha are the central figures of the celebration. Their images being placed on a swing, which is rocked now and then. A red powder is showered on the images. Later, friends and relatives throw the powder at one another. The festival is celebrated when winter passes into spring on a full moon day, rendered doubly sacred by its association with the birth of Sri Chaitanya. So this is what we know is holy. Yeah, at one time, it was a very, very sacred kind of thing. We see even in Bellermut or in our centers how people will go just with the little powder and so much reverence, place it at the feet of Guru and the president of the order and things like that. And now it's a big mess. Now, some places it's dangerous. You can't go out on the street. They'll mix everything with water and this permanent dye stuff and throw it on people. But at one time, anyhow, this is also in Bengal, especially the important because of the birth of Chaitanya Deva. The devotee saw that the master was returning to consciousness of the world, though his mind still lingered in the realm of God vision. The master said to Mahimacharan, "My dear sir, please tell us something about love of God." Now he's asking Mahimacharan, not because he's such a great devotee or anything. In fact, he's not. In fact, he's more attuned to the path of knowledge, and even then, a little bit hypocritically. But he knew these different verses, and Thakur specifically really requesting him to recite some of these verses. There's another place, I don't know if it's in the Gospel or in the Great Master, where this Mahimacharan is very proud of being a jnani. And somebody asked him, "Well, what about those devotional verses that you like to recite?" And he said, "I did that because Thakur asked me." Yeah. So anyhow, he was one of the characters, a little bit of a proud person. But Thakur was very fond of him, and he would always ask him to recite these different things. Mahimacharan chanted the following line from the Narada Pancharatra. What need is there of penance if God is worshipped with love? What is the use of penance if God is not worshipped with love? What need is there of penance if God is seen within and without? What is the use of penance if God is not seen within and without? O Brahman, O my child, cease from practicing further penances. Hasten to Shankara, the ocean of heavenly wisdom. obtain from him the love of God, the pure love praised by devotees, which snaps in twain the shackles that bind you to the world. Mahima said, once, while the great sage Narada was practicing austerity, he suddenly heard a heavenly voice repeating those lines. Master, there are two classes of devotees, Jiva kotis, or ordinary men, and ishwarakotis, or divine messengers. Yeah, Thakur doesn't often uh, explain it in this way, but these, we can't really say two classes when one contains just a handful of people and the other contains billions and billions and billions of people. So it's not like some of this will fall on one side, some of the other. The Ishwarakotis, every religion will have some type of special class of individuals. They may be prophets, they may be religious founders, they may be called patriarchs. Uh, they could be the gurus, say in the Sikh Dharma, like that. So this is one type of distinction. I don't know exactly what the historical reference is to the Jiva Koti or Ishwarakoti. If it's from Sankhya, perhaps, or do you know, Maharaj? No, I don't think it's just one of those curious things that I've asked a few of our senior sadhus that people don't know exactly. But Thakur didn't usually make things up. He must have heard this from somewhere. So what he's talking about is a special class of individual that uh, is born perfect or attains perfection and yet can be born again in order to help others. The bodhisattva ideal a little bit. Uh, in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, he designated 6 of his disciples as ishwarakotis, but he used to refer to the others in general as nitya siddhas. So it's confusing. It's not so clear cut. In the very beginning, we find Bhavanath's name mentioned, later Purna. Yeah. So it's not so terribly clear. Swami Shivananda, Mahapurush Maharaj, he made this curious statement. Somebody asked him about this Ishwarakoti. He said, why do you ask me? I'm not one of the Ishwarakotis. And then he said, by Thakur's grace, I've become one. So that means, so because these Ishwarakotis, they were supposed to come when the avatar comes. So this is like the planet that will have the moons around it, the satellite around it. Whenever that planet comes, or they'll come along with it. These nitya siddhas don't have to come exactly that time. We don't know. More of a generic type of term, but born perfect generally, or they attain perfection and can be born again perfect next time. That means they're not born on account of past karma. They're not born to the force of this is the karma, and with the opportunity to attain realization, they've already attained that. But they may have some desire to serve others or help others. That desire will allow them to be born again. Or Sri Ramakrishna usually explained things as according to the will of the Divine Mother. So we don't know how these things work, but it seems clear that if we just look at the history of the different religions, there are always a handful of great souls that seemed to have a special role and a special mission in life. So some of these that have a special mission will have companions that come along with them. This is how Sri Ramakrishna explained that. But not just the 6 Ishwarakotis, all of the direct disciples, monastic disciples. And if we want to make the circle a little bit bigger, we can say antarangas. And these inner circle devotees, this will include the householders also. And Balaram and Am and others like that around. But now Sri Ramakrishna is going to say things about these Ishwarakotis and Jivakotis that we don't find him saying exactly in the same way in other places. This is a little bit of an interesting section that way, that he'll make some distinctions here that we don't hear. Thakur will do that from time to time, that he'll explain the way something works, that we go from bhava to mahabhava, prema and everything, and then he'll say, but this is only for the Ishwarakotis. that only they can attain to this state. So sometimes he'll talk in general terms that first the path of negation, then affirmation, and then we come down again, as if it's open to everybody. Here he'll say kind of restrict it to the Ishwarakoti, these special people. So we have to try to figure out what's in his mind, why it's a little bit different here. I'll read it, you'll understand. The Jiva Koti's devotion to God is called vaidhi, formal. Now, nowhere else does he restrict this vaidhi bhakti, just or explain it in this way. Generally, this is another two-category system that we have. That first formal type of devotion, where we have to follow prescriptions, vidhis. We have to follow some prescriptions. That means that we do a certain amount of prayer and meditation and japa, and we just have a fixed routine that we follow. And at some point, we switch to a higher stage when everything becomes spontaneous, and we don't have to bind ourselves to this type of routine because the mind automatically thinks of God. So this he calls anuraga, raganuga bhakti. He has different names for it, but that's that higher type of state. Now, everywhere else, we get the impression, at least, that everybody goes through these two, that all of us can. Now, for some reason, he's making a distinction that this Jiva Koti, that means us, that means ordinary devotees. Of course, we'll all follow that in the beginning, unless we're born with very, very good samskaras, and from a very early age, we have the spontaneous love of God, which means we don't have to follow all these rules and regulations. But in general, so this, in general, the Jiva Koti's devotion to God is called vaidhi. Okay, so this formal type of devotion, that is, it conforms to scriptural laws. Not laws, or we can say prescription. That's all. It's not necessarily that whatever instructions were given by the guru, these are to be followed. And the important thing is to have a fixed routine and to have a certain time for things and to not deviate from it. This is extremely important in spiritual life, especially in the beginning. But we find some of our very, very senior sadhus who we feel are the most highly advanced, they stick to their routine more strictly than anybody else. Yeah. Sometimes we'll see this, that past 80, that still they'll insist on getting up early in the morning and going to the temple, the shrine and everything, and sit for hours sometimes. Now, it may be that now this is just joy for them, that it's not doing it, or maybe just it becomes second nature to them. But it's not that everybody will, not that people will look forward to being free from this routine. If we look at it that way, that means that we're not enjoying our spiritual practice. So it's not like, how many more years do I have to keep doing this japa? It shouldn't be like that. The point should come where spontaneously we have the joy we're doing, repeating the name constantly. And that's that other stage, this anuraga, the ecstatic love for God. So the Jiva Koti's devotion to God is called vaidhi, formal. That is, it conforms to scriptural laws. He worships God with a fixed number of articles, repeats God's holy name a specified number of times, and so on and so forth. So this is generally what we're expected to do, that especially if we take initiation, that we're given these types of instructions, and then we should very faithfully follow all of these things. It's not really a beginner stage, because very advanced spiritual seekers will still be following this. If we think of this climbing the stairs, this will be 95% of the way up, and then just the very end. The same with this vakulata, with this intense longing for God, all of that. That's the very, very end. If we think of it as the whole nighttime, we're going through a whole nighttime of spiritual practice. Just when we start to see the sunrise, then we know that means that we've achieved that intense longing waiting all night long for the sun to come up, and then we see the first glimpse, and that joy comes, and we know that it'll come. So I remember Swami Ashokananji, one of his places, he says, yeah, this is the beginning stage, but don't think that this is a small thing. To attain to this real devotion to spiritual practice and sadhana, real devotion to sadhana is an advanced stage. And even though it belongs to this first vaidhi bhakti stage and not this anuraga. Now, the other thing is that everything is gradual, that it's not that one day we just wake up. This anuraga will grow gradually. More and more will feel that love of God. So there may be a certain experience that we have that will say that this is really something my whole life changed, but it's a building up to this slowly. So the more we do, and this is the paradox. One of the paradoxes of spiritual life is that we're all longing for that stage that everything is spontaneous and free, and we get to that stage by binding ourselves to a routine. We think, how can we do that? We want to attain the state of freedom, but it works. This is the best way to do it, to keep a very fixed type of routine. This kind of devotion, like the path of knowledge, leads to the knowledge of God and to samadhi. Yeah, so we should never think that this is just for beginners, that we have to try something else after this. Thakur was saying, through this, he calls this sadhana siddhi. Through this type of spiritual practice, one can attain the highest. The Jiva koti does not return from samadhi to the relative plane. Okay, now this is also a highly nuanced topic. And sometimes the Thakur is here, he's just coming out with these statements and leaving it up to figure out, because he makes so many different statements. First of all, he'll talk about all different types of samadhi, things that we don't know about, this unmana samadhi, chetana samadhi, sthiti, all these different things that even these other pundits haven't heard about, all these different things. And again, this reaching the state of samadhi, this also has different stages and elements in it. So if we think about climbing up to the roof, that we can be on that last step and look over and see what's there. We can climb up. We may be able to jump up and stay there for a little bit. If we jump over to the other side with that idea of the world, then we won't come back. But Thakur explains in so many different ways that there will be instances where we can have this type of samadhi experience, whether we say nirvikalpa samadhi or sabvikalpa, whatever it is, bhava, we can have it, but the force of our karma or desires will keep us from remaining in that state, pull us down. And he gives that illustration. In the village, these little boys, they would catch a mongoose. And these mongoose, sometimes they'll have a little niche, a little place where they can climb up and hide there and everything. So they'll tie a brick to it so that it can climb up and just get to reach that little niche, and the weight of the brick will pull it back down again. So it's not such a simple thing. Jiva koti does not return from samadhi. We can have a glimpse. We may be able to have all these other types of bhava, different things, but if we get merged in that nirvikalpa samadhi, then there's no mechanism by which the mind will come back down again, because this ego, I, is gone. It's like trying to get the toothpaste back into the container. That once it's out, or the bird that flies out of the cage. So that's a kind of different thing. And if we want to say that we only get to that stage when all of our prarabdha karma is gone, then we can say that this, another way of explaining this is that the devotee will give up the body in that state of samadhi. Now, if it's prarabdha karma is gone, they will give up their body one way or another. But for these great souls, ordinary souls that attain that state, that then he says the body lasts 21 days. This he got from Tarayalanga Swami, I believe, that he heard that. But everything that he heard, he also verified in his life and experienced that in his life. I've told this story before. Swami Sarvagatanandaji, when he was in Kankal, the Kankal is one of our hospital centers, and in the beginning they served almost exclusively these wandering sadhus. And one elderly sadhu there, very highly regarded sadhu, he went into that state of nirvikalpa samadhi, and exactly on the 21st day, the doctors declared that now life is gone. Why 21 days? If we understand the way Sri Ramakrishna explains it, that in that state of samadhi, all of the bodily functions, they subside to the point where we can hardly tell that they're functioning at all, that almost signs of death will be there, but not quite. So if an ordinary person, say after 3 or 4 days without food or water or anything, they'll have kidney failure, it'll be slowed down to the point where it could be 21 days, if we want to understand it that way. Well, the Swami Sarvagatananda, he used to say that I never took this literally. Exact. Why 21 days? Why not 18 days, 24 days? Different. But he said, after I saw that on the 21st day, then I don't question anything that Thakur said. So anyhow, we can take it that way or not, but this is, but these Jiva kotis, if we understand, that means us. That means us. We can have all sorts of spiritual experiences and realizations and everything. This nirvikalpa samadhi is a different thing. It's a very rare type of thing, even among the direct disciples. Very few of them were established in that, say the way Swami Ramananda was. So Swamiji also only had that nirvikalpa samadhi, as far as we know, a handful of times. And Thakur said that I'm going to keep this locked up. You won't be able to get this whenever you want. After you've done mother's work, you can. So, yeah, sometimes even when I first read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, I'm thinking, oh, how wonderful all of these things are. Then he says, oh, it's reserved for these great souls. So we have to understand that what's reserved for them is something above and beyond to be able to enter into that state of nirvikalpa samadhi, and then for the mind to be able to come back down again. It's a very, and we can't even say that it takes tremendous strength of mind because the mind isn't functioning at that time. So what is it that brings the mind back down again? It's hard to say. Sometimes Thakur says that some little desire will remain in the mind somehow to bring it back down. A little desire to do good for others. But in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, even a little thing like, now give me something to eat, let me drink some water. He would force some little desire on his mind to bring it back down a little bit. So there's a very complex subject, but main point I'm trying to make is that we shouldn't think that we're not good enough for any of these things. We won't be able to get this type of realization and all of that. The other thing, Thakur seems to make a distinction between this realization that comes from this nirvikalpa samadhi and the type of realization that the devotee will get. So this, or even the jnani doesn't have to have this nirvikalpa samadhi. They'll just have some insight, flash of insight. The devotee also, they'll reach that state of oneness, but there won't be that fear that they'll enter into some meditative state that they can pull their minds back down from again. And it's a complex subject. Thakur says so many different things. The Shukadeva, see, he'll even say that 2 different schools of thought. Some say that he went and he saw this ocean of Satchidananda. Some that he went and drank a few drops of it, and some that he entered into it. And others say, no, if he'd entered into it, he never could have come back again. So even that, for someone like Shukadeva, for there to be some question, if he really entered into that, the deep state of samadhi, could even a Shukadeva have come back from that? So Thakur leaves these things a little bit open sometimes for us to try to interpret as we can. So this is all about the Jiva koti, and not a second-class citizen at all. These can be some of the greatest saints that we've ever heard of, or just good devotees. But the case of the Ishwarakoti is different. Now remember, this is a handful of people in the history of the world, a very small number that can be counted this way. He follows now there's another thing. He follows the process of negation and affirmation. Other places, Thakur invites us to do the same thing. At least, see, there are two ways to do this. One is yes, with this our intellectual understanding, vichara, and the other is to actually climb to the roof and come back down again. So with us, we can practice this. First, we negate things, and then afterwards, we realize that everything is a manifestation of that same Brahman. And he'll explain it to you. But the case of the Ishwarakoti is different. He follows the process of negation and affirmation. This is anuloma viloma. If you look at the way the hairs are, or the hairs in the head, it'll go in one direction. And then there'll be a reverse process where you have to go with the grain and against the grain. We can put it that way. So we do one process in one way, and then reverse it and come back again. So this is here. The translation is negation and affirmation. So it's a good way of understanding it. It's not a literal translation, but a good way of understanding it. First, he negates the world. Now, negating the world simply means that we're trying to divide everything into two categories, sat and asat, that which is real and that which is unreal or transitory or temporary or changeful, different ways of understanding, of course. So we have two different categories. So we're becoming dualistic from that point of view, that we're trying to separate these two in order to understand the real nature of Brahman, that which is completely unchanging, that which is eternal, that which was never born, which never dies. We're trying to isolate that the same way that we will extract something from the coverings around it. So to negate the world means simply to understand that this belongs to a different category. The Jnani will say it belongs to Maya, or we can just say that this belongs to this transitory nature of the world. Anything composed of the three gunas, if we want to look at it from a realistic point of view, Sankhya point of view, anything composed of the five elements, the three gunas, anything that has some material ground to it, anything that's the combination of different factors and what we would normally call this empirical universe, this world as we experience it. First, he negates the world, realizing that it is not Brahman. So when Swamiji says we're seeing nothing but Brahman, that's afterwards. In the beginning, we make a distinction. They say, no, this is not. This is neti. Huh? But then he affirms the same world, seeing it as the manifestation of Brahman. So what Sri Ramakrishna does, he takes this distinction between sat and asat, between the real and the unreal. All the different schools will explain this asat in a different way, even to the point of just pure illusion. There'll be some who will take it that way. There's this mithya, this word mithya. It has that sense that something is just illusory. It also has the sense of just being false. So false doesn't mean unreal. They're two different things. Suppose I make a statement that we can say, yes, that's true. And then I make another statement and somebody say, no, that's not right. That's false. Both are statements. It's not that the second statement is just an illusion. No, I said it. It's a real thing, but there's some falsity to it, the mithya. So this is why if we look at the Bhagavad Gita, this term mithya, it comes a couple of different times. And one is when Arjuna, he says, I won't fight. And Sri Krishna says that this decision of yours, mitya, this is false. That you think that you're making the decision, you won't be able to do it. Or people who act in a deceitful way, hypocritical, mityachari. So there are different ways of understanding the mitya. Better not to think of it as completely illusory. And for Sri Ramakrishna, generally he says anitya. This is, I love this translation of the gospel by Swami Nikhilanandaji. But one thing I wish he'd have done a little differently, almost always when it says anitya, he'll write illusory. And it gives a different feeling to it. And or avastu, Thakur uses these different terms, that he's not really saying that it's illusory. He's saying that avastu means there's no substance behind it. And the mitya, Thakur never uses that unless he's saying according to the Gyanis. Otherwise, it's always anitya, transitory. And what does transitory mean? This universe is transitory. No, life is transitory. That I am transitory. That I'll have to leave everything behind. Very practical way of understanding these things. Very practical. That we all experience that. We experience it as we get older. We experience with death of loved ones. That constantly we're seeing. It's not just that these physical objects will one day not be here anymore. It's that we won't be here anymore. So we read this beautiful things like Bhaja Govindam, just about how this life is flying by. Kala Kariyadati Gachati Ayu. Time is playing this game with us, and our whole life is flying by. So that idea of the transitory nature of the world, this is how Thakur emphasizes it. So what Thakur does is he says that this idea that Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, that Brahman alone is real, and this world is some type of illusion. He says this is, at the time of sadhana, we engage in this type of reasoning in order to isolate the real nature of Brahman. After we've done that, we get to the roof. When we come back down again, we see everything a manifestation of that same Brahman. This is how he explains it. So he doesn't have any quarrel with this idea of neti. This is basically Shankaracharya. But he says that this is not a final position. This is at the time of sadhana, we have to do that. Otherwise, we won't be able to separate. We get mixed things up. I have to be able to distinguish the real self from all of the coverings, the ego, personality, and all of that. I have to be able to pull them apart. But then afterwards, I can see that everything belongs to the same reality, like the bell fruit. We have the onion and the bell fruit. The one that you peel everything off to find that reality in, and the other, the bell fruit, you realize that the skin and the flesh and the seeds, everything belongs to the same bell fruit. So Thakur likes both of these illustrations. One is actually a Dvaitic, the other Vishishta Dvaitic type of illustration. But Thakur doesn't engage in those types of things. These are all very practical ways of looking at things. So first, he negates the world, realizing that it is not Brahman, but then he affirms the same world, seeing it as the manifestation of Brahman. To give an illustration, a man wanting to climb to the roof first negates the stairs as not being the roof. But on reaching the roof, he finds that the stairs are made of the same materials as the roof, brick, lime, and brick dust. Then he can either move up and down the stairs or remain on the roof as he pleases. Now, this going up and down, this is reserved for the Ishwarakoti. That they can even spend some time and relax on the roof. For us, maybe we can go, we better not lose our hold of the last step. Hold on to the ladder. We get up there, the story of the friends, say, aha, how wonderful, and jump over and not come back. But as I say, this understanding of this negation and affirmation, this applies to all of us. We can all, just through our reasoning and understanding, that, and we can even start out with this idea, everything is a manifestation of Brahman. This iti. Thakur talks about this as different types of paths for the devotee. The devotee from the very beginning can say this is all the glory of the Divine Mother. This Mother is manifesting in all her glory as this visible universe. And we have this idea, Virat. We have this idea for early Upanishadic idea also, that the world is almost a visible form of Ishwara, or Saguna Brahman. Shukadeva was absorbed in samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi. So Thakur always considered him as one of these rare souls, Ishwarakoti, we can say. Nirvikalpa samadhi, jada samadhi. These are, we don't know any distinction. They're more or less the same thing. Jada, because it looks as if someone is dead. They're like an inert thing. Since Shuka was to recite the Bhagavata to King Parikshit, the Lord sent the sage Narada to him. Yeah, there's the whole story that King Parikshit, he was cursed somehow to be bitten by a snake, and he was told that he'll have 7 days to live, but then he was given some reprieve somehow that these 7 days, now we'll let Shukadeva come and recite the entire Bhagavata to you, so you'll pass away after hearing that. So this is how they explain the origin of this famous Puran, Bhagavata Puran. So the Shukadev, that was one of the things he was born to recite the Bhagavata to King Parikshit. Narada saw him seated like an inert thing, absolutely unconscious of the world around him. Thereupon, Narada sang 4 couplets on the beauty of Hari to the accompaniment of the veena. While the first couplet was being sung, the hair on Shuka's body stood on end. Next, he shed tears, for he saw the form of God, the embodiment of spirit within himself in his heart. Thus, Shukadeva saw the form of God even after Jada Samadhi. He was an ishwarakoti. So for Sri Ramakrishna, this nirvikalpa samadhi, there's no question of what, there's nobody to see anything. We have this assumption that if there is such a thing as an individual soul, it's merged in this Paramatman. We don't know how to explain it exactly, but coming down from that, then we try to explain what was that experience that we had. That so the devotee may explain it one way, that I was in a state of perfect union with the beloved. We'll find Sufis and others that explain it that way. Others may say that then Brahman alone existed at that time, or I found myself merged in Brahman. But there's no distinction, there's no description, there's no nothing in that state. Coming back down again, everything is just trying to describe it with the mind. Otherwise, Thakur says that it can't be explained, that state. But for the devotee coming back down again, the devotee can reestablish himself or herself in a relationship with the personal God. So this is what Thakur did, of course, with the Divine Mother. And he says that these God-realized souls, when they come back, the mind comes down to the level of the world, that then they live in the world with a ripe ego. And it may be the ego of knowledge, like Shankaracharya, or the ego of devotion, and like Chaitanya Deva or Sri Ramakrishna. For Sri Ramakrishna, he had both, but generally he preferred, he very often he'll say that it's a question of preference. The devotee prefers to experience that relationship, the joy of that type of relationship. He used to quote that Ram Prasad song, that I would rather enjoy the taste of sugar than become sugar. What fun is that, becoming sugar? We can have a little sense of separation, keep that little stick of ego on the surface of the water, allow us to enjoy that type of relationship. And Jnani will say, I also enjoy my relationship of oneness. Soham. I am one with that ultimate reality. That's my highest type of enjoyment. So the difference of temperament, not one better than the other. Hanuman, after having the vision of God, both with form and without, remained firmly devoted to the form of Rama, the embodiment of consciousness and bliss. Even Hanuman, We know that famous verse that we always recite. Even he could experience that oneness. That he would say, when I feel this Atma Buddhya, when I feel that I am the self, then you and I are one and the same, no distinction. But generally, mine was on a lower plane because he liked to be this the dasa. He'd like to have this dasya bhava and be the servant of Rama. So Hanuman, after having the vision of God, both with form and without, remained firmly devoted to the form of Rama, the embodiment of consciousness and bliss. Prahlada sometimes realized, I am he. He's giving all examples of what we can call ishwarakotis. Now, we shouldn't think that Sri Ramakrishna didn't accept the reality of the Jivan Mukta. Jivan Mukta will be an ordinary person, of course, not ordinary, but not at least not in the Ishwarakoti, but someone who attains to that state of perfection and realization and will not have to be born again. So there'll be Videha Mukti at the end, but lives in the world as a free soul. That's open to all of us.
Is it at the time of death?
Time of death, no. This is from the time of realization onward. Lives in the world as a free soul. Jivan, jivat, it means while living. Free while living. And the other videha, when we give up the body, then no more rebirth or anything. But Thakur will often talk about the Jivan Muktas, these free realized souls. So there has to be some scope for attaining that state, short of this nirvikalpa state where we can't come back down again. And generally, it's a path of devotion. Thakur talks about. So Prahlada, he'll be another example. Sometimes realized, I am he. Sometimes he felt that he was the servant of God. How can such a person live without love of God? That is why he must accept the relationship of master and servant, feeling that God is the master and himself the servant. So this dasya bhava and all of these relations, they serve two purposes. One, this is the vehicle which can allow us to realize God. And two, this is how we can live in the world afterwards, or at least the Ishwarakoti. That they'll come back and be reestablished in that relationship. But that relationship is what allows us to climb higher and higher and have that type of realization. So Thakur says that Aktabhav ashwarakoteha, we have to really rely on this. That this is the anchor. This is the refuge in our spiritual life. We seek refuge in this type of relationship, and we adopt it. We have to superimpose that idea on the mind, convince ourselves, because our natural sense of identification is with the body and with our human personality. So we have to make a conscious effort. If we want to worship God as mother, I have to stop thinking of myself as an adult. I have to start thinking of myself as a child. I want to worship God as the baby, like Gopala. I have to think of myself as a mother, as a woman and a mother. This is the way that works according to this theory, the different bhavas. So with all of them, it's not just the concept of God, form of God, the way in which we want to worship God, but what is the nature of the devotee to worship God in that manner? So this is why Sri Ramakrishna, when he practiced these different moods, different bhavas, that he had to identify with the worshiper first. He had to identify with Hanuman before he could worship Rama with his dasya bhava. That's why he did everything, hopping from place to place, eating raw fruit, tying his cloth with a tail in the back, all of those things, to impress upon the mind, arupkara, to imprint on the mind this idea that I really am a servant of God, just as Hanuman, as a monkey, was a servant of Rama. But after realization, that same attitude will be the natural one to fall back on. And in order to live in the world, we have to have some sense of I. We want to talk to people, deal with people, function. There has to be some sense of I. So this is that really ripe ego. The other one is a ripe ego that we're practicing, but this is when they fully ripen, that there's no chance of identification with the body anymore. Not that we don't feel that, yes, of course, food is going into this mouth, so that much will be there. But the real sense of who I am, for Sri Ramakrishna, it was always, I'm a child of the Divine Mother. That was even he practiced other moods, but it would always come back to that one, it seemed. So with Prahlada, that's why he accepts the relationship of master and servant, feeling that God is the master and himself the servant. This enables him to enjoy the bliss of Hari, bliss of God. In this attitude, he feels that God is the bliss and he himself is the enjoyer. So all different ways of understanding this type of relationship. The ego of devotion, the ego of knowledge, and the ego of a child do not harm the devotee. Now, really, we have two categories here. The ego of knowledge is one, and the ego of devotion will include the ego of a child or the ego of a servant, all of the other relationships. So really, the two different types of egos that Thakur talks about. These do not harm the devotee. Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge. The ego of a child is not attached to anything. So Thakur used to say, this is why the Paramahamsas, they like to keep a 5-year-old child near them, that they have no attachment to things. There's a certain innocence that they have, that not this self-consciousness that we all have. So they like to, because they have that nature, they have that same nature, so they can appreciate that. The ego of a child is not attached to anything. Of course, they have temper tantrums and they seem that they won't let go of anything, but the next minute they'll forget about it. The child is beyond the 3 gunas. He is not under the control of any of them. One moment you find him angry, the next moment it is all over. One moment you see him building his playhouse, the next moment he forgets all about it. Now you see him love his playmates, but if they are out of his sight a few days, he forgets all about them. A child is not under the control of any of the gunas, sattva, rajas, or tamas. Yeah, of course, we don't find real children like that too much, but it's at a certain age. But I think really it's the innocence of the child and how pure, the purity to small children. The bhakta feels, O God, thou art the Lord, and I am thy devotee. So just in general, devotee in particular can be child, can be servant, can be friend, can be any of the relationships, lover. This I is the ego of bhakti. Why does such a lover of God retain the ego of devotion? There is a reason. The ego cannot be got rid of, so let the rascal remain as the servant of God, the devotee of God. Now, Thakur talks about this ego in 2 different senses. One, if we want to look at it from a metaphysical point of view, is there really something that we can call the ego? The Sankhya system, we have this ahankara. It seems like, yes, that it's part of this antakarana, that it's a structure of the mind, that it's a real thing. But in Vedanta, it has a different type of meaning, that if we analyze and try to find it, we find that there's no substance to it, it's just an idea. It's an idea. It grows out of this vijnanamaya kosha. That once we reach that stage where we can reflect, this mind attains the ability to observe itself, and then the ego emerges. And then we start to fill it in, and we start to materialize it. We start to identify it with all sorts of lower things, and all sorts of superficial types of things. But if we analyze it, this ego has no substance to it. This is the pulling, tearing away of the layers of the onion. So Thakur says, you try to find the ego. When you've taken off the final layer, you find nothing is there. We don't find this ego. Now, the other sense of ego is simply mental feeling of who I am. And this we all have. Unless we're sleeping or nirvikalpa samadhi or engrossed in reading a book and we forget that we're reading the book, any other time that we have some sense of who we are. So, and from that point of view, that feeling of I comes back. There's no really getting rid of it. We can analyze and understand that it has a phenomenal existence, not an absolute existence. Apparent existence, phenomenal existence, but it's pervasive and it doesn't leave us. Just while analyzing, we can see through it, and we can, as far as possible, we can identify with this witnessing consciousness. Even that, I am the witness. Even that's a type of ego. It's how we think of ourselves. Yeah. So this sense of ego will always come back. Thakur says. So the ego cannot be got rid of. So let the rascal remain as the servant of God, the devotee of God. Now he'll go through this again. You may reason 1,000 times. You may reason 1,000 times, but you cannot get rid of the ego. So this vichara, this is meant for us to see that there's no absolute, there's no substance to it, to this I. We can do that. We can analyze the nature of the personality simply in terms of all the coverings of it, this through this Panchakosha doctrine, and realize ourselves to be just the witness. We can do that, and we can do it 1,000 times. Day after day, we can do it. But like Totapuri, let somebody try to light their children with this sacred fire, and he'll get angry. So it just comes back. It's human nature. We can't do too much about it, but it won't last. See, for God relay soul, that it's not even a stick on water. It's like a mark on water. How long does that last? And the ego of these God realized souls, it can't harm anybody. It's just the ego in name and appearance only. And like if a sword is turned into gold, you can't use it in battle. It's too soft. You won't be able to harm anybody with that. Or the string that's burnt, you can't tie anything with it anymore. It looks like a string. There'll be a little trail of ash that will look exactly the way the string looked before it was burnt. But Thakur said, blow on it and it'll disappear. Yeah. So that's the nature of the ego. Yeah. Or even the anger. Yeah, they say, yeah, Shadura, Yodeda. It's just like a mark on water. So you may reason 1,000 times, but you cannot get rid of the ego. That means the feeling of I, that feeling that we have. The ego is like a pitcher and Brahman like the ocean, an infinite expanse of water on all sides. The pitcher is set in the ocean. The water is both inside and out and out. The water is everywhere, yet the pitcher remains. Now, this pitcher is the ego of the devotee. As long as the ego remains, you and I remain, and there also remains the feeling, O God, thou art the Lord, and I am thy devotee. Thou art the master, and I am thy servant. Now, this picture of ego may also, this is for highly advanced souls. That picture of ego may be fully, yeah, this is who I am. That exactly what you see. You see this physical body. I'm the person of such an age and height and weight and all of that. And who am I? I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm a carpenter. This is who I am. So the very highly advanced state to say, no, I'm a child of God, devotee of God, is much higher type of ego sense. You may reason 1,000,000 times. See, first it was 1,000 times. Now he's upped it. Now it's 1,000,000 times. 1,000,000 times, but you cannot get rid of it. But it is different if there is no picture. That means nirvikalpa samadhi. And no picture, then mind is not functioning, so there's no ego. If the mind is not functioning, there's no ego. The picture is gone. This is manonasha. Mind is perfectly unfunctioning at that time. So then it's different. Then there's no distinction or anything. Narendra entered the room and saluted the master. They began to talk together. Presently, the master came down from the couch and sat on the floor on which a mat had been spread. So imagine, they say couch. For those who don't know, it's not a couch, it's a small bed. He had a small bed and a bigger bed next to it. Uh, but now he wants to be a little closer and more intimate with his devotees. He doesn't like that type of separation. So coming down to tell something important, sitting on the floor with all of them. This is why this gospel is so beautifully written that we can picture everything as it's taking place. Picture him getting down and sitting next to his beloved Narendra. Presently, the master came down from the couch and sat on the floor on which a mat had been spread. In the meantime, the room had become filled with people, both devotees and visitors. But Narendra is there. He doesn't care for anybody else, or maybe he doesn't even notice anybody else. Master to Narendra, are you well? I hear that you often visit Girish Ghosh at his house. Is it true? Now, last time we find from time to time, Thakur will ask him this question. And Thakur had reservations about Narendra spending too much time with Girish because of the lifestyle that Girish had led and the fact that samskara will be there and Narendra is such a pure, sweet, loving soul. On the other hand, Girish had this fanatical devotion and tremendous conviction that Sri Ramakrishna was an avatar. And that aspect of it that he appreciated very much. And so it seems that he had mixed emotions. We talked about this last time, mixed emotions about Narendra spending a lot of time with Girish. Here he's going to take the negative point of view a little bit. Narendra, yes, sir. I go there now and then. Yeah, we've seen that Narendra could mix with anybody. He could mix with anybody and very often with older people, and just like the same age. How I had that great friendship with Hazra. And very often he would bring worthless people, and Thakur would say, why do you hang out with these worthless? He just had a soft spot for the different characters of different types and everything. Always defending Hazra also. Yeah. Girish had been visiting Sri Ramakrishna for some months. Yeah, he came rather late to Sri Ramakrishna, but very quickly developed that great devotion for him. The master said that none could fathom the depth of Girish's faith. And his faith was in Sri Ramakrishna himself, more than anything else. That he was a savior born on earth to save Girish. And his longing for God was as intense as his faith was deep. At home, he was always absorbed in the thought of Sri Ramakrishna. Now remember, this is all M talking now. Many of the master's devotees visited him. They talked only about Sri Ramakrishna. But Girish was a householder who had had varied experiences of worldly life. Yeah. He used to say, any possible sin that you can imagine, that I did it many times. He said, yeah, if you piled up all the sins that I did, it would be higher than a mountain. And once he said, if I'd known there was such a thing as Ramakrishna who could wipe away all of these sins just like that, I would have committed far more. But Girish was a householder who had had varied experiences of worldly life, and the master knew that Narendra would renounce the world, that he would shun lust and gold, both mentally and outwardly. Master, he's going to ask the same question that he asked before. Do you visit Girish frequently? So a little nervous about it. On the other hand, he doesn't mind that Girish will be talking about Sri Ramakrishna all the time. No matter how much one washes a cup that has contained a solution of garlic, so the trace of the smell will certainly linger. Now, Thakur gets in trouble here because the word gets back to Girish that Thakur made that statement. Girish is highly offended, and then he'll say, will not the smell go away? And Thakur backtracks a little bit. He said, yes.
In a fairly profound way, though.
in a very profound way.
He says that something about a blazing fire.
Blazing fire of knowledge, yes, can even wash away the smell of garlic. Yeah, but he doesn't say that until he raises the issue first. But yes, yeah. So, but his point is that even after realization, some of these old samskaras can remain. So they can remain a little bit. We're reading Panchadashi. Did we get to that yet? One of the verses will talk about that. How these samskaras can remain a little bit, but they're not of much importance at that point. We'll still have personality traits and things like that. The youngsters who come here are pure souls, untouched by woman and gold. Men have associated a long time with woman and gold, lust and greed. We don't like to use this woman and gold thing, but in this context, it means that people associate with objects of temptation and enjoyment, however we understand it. So men who have associated a long time with objects of lust and gold smell of the garlic, as it were. They are like a mango pecked by crows. So he's using strong language now. Such a fruit cannot be offered to the deity in the temple, and you would hesitate to eat it yourself. Now, this is the same time praising Girish for his great devotion. Again, take the case of a new pot and another in which curd has been made. One is afraid to keep milk in the second pot, for the milk very often turns sour. Yeah, we have these parables of Christ. That putting wine in old sacks, the wine will turn sour. Householder devotees like Girish form a class by themselves. They desire yoga and also bhoga. Yeah, in his case, it was extreme. In the case of others, say Keshav, he used to say that about Keshav also, but not to this extent. With this great long, for him, bhoga was maybe some name and fame and things. Yeah, not this terrible appetite for sense pleasure and things. Their attitude is that of Ravana, who wanted to enjoy the maidens of heaven and at the same time realize Rama. So these are Bhairava. That's why they say he was somehow embodiment, almost avatar of Bhairava. They're like the asuras, the demons, who enjoy various pleasures and also realize Narayana. So hard for us to understand because we generally feel that the main prerequisite is purity of heart and leading a very pure type of life. But this is some exceptional type of person. Okay, yeah, we'll stop here. Anyhow, Narendra is going to defend him as he always does. That's what can you saw. So we're stopping here. This is page 709, just about 2/3 of the way down. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukam Bhathuravikraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Okay, thank you, everyone. Just a reminder that we start our retreat. We have a retreat starting tomorrow, and it'll go all day tomorrow. We'll have wonderful music concert tomorrow night, and then Saturday it'll go until around 4. We'll also have another musical performance. Sunday afternoon, another musical performance. And for those of you who are watching from out of town, everything will be live streamed, so you can all follow that on your website. Okay. Thank you, everyone.